Guys, welcome to another video. I'll be discussing parajumbles in this. There are a few parajumbles that I would actually let you solve first. You can pause the video and solve them. This is the first, this is the second, third, and this is the fourth. Okay, so there are four parajumbles that we are going to discuss. Uh, Pick up a specific time. Okay, don't go on and on. The idea of solving parajumbles, it's generally a tactical choice. Okay, there's no point trying to solve parajumbles if you take 3 4 5 minutes sometimes, that I notice in classrooms. So it's better you have a fixed deadline. Generally parajumbles are in three different categories, what I've noticed in the last few years. So there will be that unsolvable parajumble. This video doesn't have any of those, but there will be those unsolvable parajumbles. An easy way to figure out which are the unsolvable parajumbles is on the left side. Okay, you will never see connectors, and then you'll not see any pronouns, nothing on. They're all independent sentences. These are unsolvable parajumbles because only the guy who's seen the original order knows the answer. Okay, there's this weird. I'm not a big fan of parajumbles, like most of the people already know if you watch the previous videos, because there is no way to tell whether this is the only. In case of independent sentences, there's no way to be sure that the author thinks this is the only way in which those four sentences can be written, but the answer tends to be the order which was there in the source. But if you ask the same order, can I jumble up the same sentence in other ways? Because there is no grammar constraint. If there are no connectors, there are no grammar constraints. I can arrange them in any which way generally. So it's actually a very bad question if there are unsolvable parajumbles, and they tend to be one or two like that every year. So you'll have to spot those first. Excuse me. So what you'll have to do is check if there are unsolvable parajumbles. Don't touch them. There'll also probably be a gift parajumble. Okay, which is the gift parajumble? Generally shorter sentences. On the left side, you will see connectors, negative connectors, positive connectors. As you discuss, and if you watch enough videos, you'll already know which are those clues. So generally, if it's one clue per sentence, generally, okay, that's a gift parajumble. One clue per sentence means every sentence has something, some connector, pronoun, proper noun, first name, connection or date connection, chronological indicators, the n number of things that can help you with between sentences that I've discussed in individual questions. But those are your gift parajumbles. Always search for the gift parajumble. In very high likelihood that there'll be one like that. Solve that probably 30 to 45 seconds. The average 99% probably solves it in about 30-45 seconds. You can take 1.5 minutes also, that's fine. The unsolvable parajumble will eat up 2.5 minutes and still not get the answer. So please be careful about that. And there'll be a medium difficulty parajumble sometimes where this probably will be in that category. I don't know how you guys feel about these questions, but I'm guessing these are all a little easier, on the easier side. But medium level are those which are, there'll be only one trick. So these are those questions where, let's say the order is 1 2 3 4, you end up getting 1 2 4 3 or 2 1 3 4, like that. So there'll only be one trick hidden in the parajumble. That between two sentences is a little confusing order, confusing pair. Otherwise, the rest of it is pretty clear. Those are your medium difficulty parajumbles. So that should be solvable too if you practice them enough. Okay, without further ado, let's look at the first question. See, if you notice, this starts with a negative connector called but, right? So negative connectors, what do negative connectors do? This is your negative connector, but, however, nevertheless, nonetheless, on the other hand, on the contrary, bunch of them. Negative connector means on the right side of the negative connector, whatever is the tone of the sentence, left side, whatever is the tone of the sentence, they're opposites of each other, right? So, but a painting by Van Gogh doesn't come to be about climate activism when soup is thrown on it, and an early 20th century fresco doesn't become an essentially time-based work with no fixed appearance when someone ineptly repaints it. Okay, in case of sentences like these, you'll have to be a little careful. See, these are individual examples. If you notice, okay, this is an individual example, this is an individual example. So you're looking for what these examples are leading to. But a painting by Van Gogh doesn't come to be about climate activism just because some soup was thrown on it. Early 20th century fresco, again, doesn't matter whether it's a painting or a fresco, it's a repetition, right? Doesn't become an essentially time-based work with no fixed appearance when someone ineptly repaints it. So ineptly repaints. So always watch out for these patterns. Okay, soup being thrown and ineptly being repainted. These patterns are very important parajumble. So this whole, it's basically giving you two different examples and saying, but whatever painting does not become something bigger when something someone damages them or does something like that. Of course, we always have a choice about whether to touch, manipulate, or destroy an artwork. This is the second sentence, but now you know the pattern, okay? Ineptly repainting it, soup being thrown on it, destroying an artwork. This is the pattern, okay? All these three are connected. So watch out for phrases like these. These are all connections, okay? Don't always overly depend on just the connectors. Sometimes there'll not be any connectors, but you'll see these connections. So here, it's a generic idea, right? Destroying an artwork. Examples of that is this, which means that you know that two is always going to come before one, because the generic ideas always come before the specific examples, unless there is a grammar constraint. Grammar does not listen to these critical reasoning rules, okay? So if there's a grammar constraint, then you can't apply this rule. But if there's no grammar constraint, the generic idea always comes before the example sentences, okay? Then museum files and occasionally news articles are full of stories of illicit participation. Illicit is a negative word, okay? So destroying an artwork, illicit participation, these two expressions mean the same thing. So watch out for these vocab connections. So it's a repetition of similar words. So destroying an artwork, illicit participation, museum files are full of these stories. And then there are these stories, okay? These actions are external to the work and what it expresses. Now, when you're reading a parajumble question, always start with sentences which have pronouns or negative connectors. Which pronouns? He, she, they, these, those, and such. 6 pronouns are extremely helpful. This, that, and it are very tricky. So generally, I don't subscribe or recommend to using them as clues. But watch out for these. It's a very powerful clue, this one. These and those, because you straight away know what comes before. The pronoun always has to come immediately after the noun sentence. Which actions is he talking about? It's talking about these actions, right? So 1 and 4 is a block. There's only one sentence with actions in it. Soup being thrown, someone ineptly repainting it, okay? The other thing that you notice is 3 is a continuation of 2. How do I know that? Museum files are full of stories of illicit participation, independent sentence. Of course, we always have a choice about whether to touch, manipulate, or destroy an artwork. Now, a lot of you will put 2 after 3, okay, because you see the of course. But remember that of course is emphasis or stress. It can be the starting sentence. You'll make a mistake in this particular question by putting 2 after 3 if you are of the very bad mindset. I don't know how this wrong way of solving parajumbles has gotten propagated, but generally I notice that a lot of students think that just because a sentence is independent, it becomes the intro sentence. Please remember that the first sentence need not be an independent sentence. I can start a paragraph with a but, because this could be the third paragraph or the fourth paragraph, okay? As long as I maintain the same tone, I can start a paragraph with yet or however, or even with a pronoun if I don't give the noun in any of the remaining sentences. So don't go by default that independent sentence have to be the starting sentence of the paragraph. Second, any good intro sentence can also be a good conclusion sentence. So you don't go with the logic. If you go with that logic, you'll get this question wrong, because you'll end up putting 3 before 2 because you think 2 is a connector, so it comes after 3, okay? The order actually is 2, 3, 1, 4. 1, 4 is very clear because these actions is the actions in 1. So 1, 4 is pretty clear. But if you notice, but a painting of Vincent van Gogh doesn't come to be about climate activism and soup is thrown out. You can actually stop reading here the second time or third time, because all of this is just repetition, isn't it? One example repeated twice. So as far as you are concerned, the sentence ends it. Learn to summarize and shorten the sentences in parajumbles. Okay, that's a major skill that you need. You can't keep repeating the whole sentence in your head. Have to just come to the small part and keep repeating that. So painting by Van Gogh doesn't come to be about climate activism and soup is thrown on it. These actions are external to the work and what it expresses. So on the left side of but what should be there, okay, we have a choice about whether to touch, manipulate, or destroy an artwork. Museum files are full of stories of illicit participation. These two will come to the left side of 1, because illicit participation, but just because there is an illicit participation doesn't mean it will become something else. The painting remains the painting. It doesn't come to be about climate activism just because someone's damaged it to make a point, okay? So you know that 2, 3 or 3, 2 will be on the left side of 1, 4 because of the usage of the word but here, right? So is it going to be 2, 3, 3, 2 is the big question. How do you decide that? We always have a choice, it says. And museum files are full of stories. So once he says full of stories, you have to go to this, which is the story, isn't it? From here, you can't go to the bigger idea. This is a smaller idea than this. Here we are talking about our choice, whether to touch, manipulate, or destroy. 3 things. Of that, destroying has been specified here, and then there are stories. So you can't start the idea. So 3, 1, 4 is the idea, right? You can't start that, then go back to something outside. Okay, these are all outside. Of course, we always have a choice. So whether we have a choice or not, this part is outside the topic of 3, 1, and 4, which means 2 has to be the first sentence. You have to ask all these questions. So first you'll have to come down to 1, 4 is the block. That's just step 1. You have to get the 1, 4 block first. Okay, if you could not get the 1, 4 block, that means you're terrible with parajumbles. Doesn't matter. You can actually improve, but basically you're not following the methods. Enough videos already on this channel. You can watch them. Plenty of other examples and outside help available too. You have to make this 1, 4 block. You have to know that 2, 3 or 3, 2 has to be the starting, and then you'll ask the big question, the 99 percentiles question. Is it 2, 3 or 3, 2? Because don't do all the hard work and just because there's an of course put 2 after 3. Okay, because this is a much bigger idea and you can't start talking about choice once you already start talking about stories of illicit participation. Okay, can't come inside the topic and then go outside the topic. So the answer for this one will be 2, 3, 1, 4. Notice that there is a positive connector here, right? And fur is everywhere. The other pattern that you'll also find, most of you would have found that you have ironwood, you have camphor, and you have fir, the fates of the trees, isn't it? So you have 3 examples. So obviously the generic sentence comes first and the examples come later. So you know that 2 is going to be the starting sentence of the paragraph. Okay. And if you notice, one's talking about camphor, one's talking about ironwood, one is talking about fir. So when you have 3 similar sentences, the one that has a positive connector in this case, and obviously is the last sentence, isn't it? So if you have A, B, C, all 3 talking about the same thing, the one that has a positive connector obviously will be in the end, because you won't talk about camphor, then say and fir, and then come to ironwood without a positive connector. So if you want to come to, if let's say ironwood is the last sentence, camphor and fir and ironwood, camphor and fir, moreover ironwood, camphor and fir, furthermore ironwood. It has to be one more positive connector. So if you don't have that, you straight away know. So it's just like a LR question, right? With seating arrangements. So Parajumbles is exactly like seating arrangements. The way you solve seating arrangements, you solve Parajumbles the same way. Okay, don't need to go too deep into the sentence and understand the idea, because when they're jumbled up, it's very difficult to figure out the idea. Solve it like an LR. Like for example, when I say A sitting to the left of B, B sitting to the left of C, or whatever, to solve the question, don't go into the personalities of A, B, C, and D. Right? You simply just take the data and arrange it. Do the same thing with Parajumbles. For most part, it will work. Okay, and then once you have the order, try to figure out if your idea is coherent or not. Anyways, so the big question is, should it be 3-4 or 4-3? Okay, camphor grows patchily throughout an extensive territory, often as trees or in temple complexes, but is far less prevalent in the broader landscape. Ironwood is now all but extirpated, removed from China. Remember this word, okay? X basically means something's going out. Extirpated, removed, plugged from China, except where reintroduced from South Asia. These two are what we call in CR parlance, they're called lateral arguments, okay? Lateral arguments, they all come off the same level. So you should not take a guess on whether it should be 3 or 4. The big clue is here. Okay, ironwood is now all but this is called a chronological indicator. It gives you time, right? So the fates of the trees reflect both the old and new realities. Okay, so the moment he talks about old and new realities, the one that gives you a time indicator straight away is the follow-up sentence. So you'll have 4 here, and therefore 3 will end up here. And if you notice in this sentence, camphor grows patchily throughout an extensive territory, simple present tense. Ironwood is now all but extirpated, means in the past something was different, which is the context here. Okay, so an easy question if you spot this now, otherwise you'll end up missing out. So if you actually got 2, 3, 4, 1 here, it also helps you learn something. Your problem is you do not put in thought where the thought is required. Okay, just too restless to get to the answer, move on to the next one. Don't do that. You have to be able to explain, and there's no way you would have explained 3 as something that comes before 4. So put in some thought. When 2 sentences are similar, add that extra 15 seconds. Think, why not 4, 3? Always ask the reverse question. Be the devil's advocate, right? So if you're absolutely sure about one, ask why not this. That will clarify. If you can give a clear answer to why not this, that means you know something. So even if you make a mistake, you know what logic you gave, and therefore you know that your logic is wrong. So you'll be able to figure out whether your logic was wrong because of vocab, grammar, or critical reasoning. So you'll be able to fix it. If you don't have a clear reason, even if you got the answer wrong, even if someone else actually gives you the explanation, you won't learn anything from that mistake. Anyway, so 2, 4, 3, 1. In this, if you notice the pattern, you have 2 questions. Okay, from a structural standpoint, of what possible use is a pelvis to a creature that has no legs? So which creature are we talking about? Oh, my apologies. Which creature are we talking about is the first thing you should be asking. Okay, so second, if the python was created, then what purpose would there have been to give it a pelvis? Okay, so between 2 and 4, so you understand that the second sentence has to come before the 4th sentence by simple reasoning, right? So structural standpoint, what possible use is a pelvis to a creature that has no legs? If the python was created, then what purpose would there have been to give it a pelvis? Okay, so these are the 2 things. This is the first confusion. Is it 2, 4 or 4, 2? Next, we can of course argue that no one can understand the motivations of a creator, but that is hardly a scientific explanation. Now this of course will tell you that 1 has to come later, okay, after 2 and 4. Now why does 1 have to come after 2 and 4? Because I need to have context where no one can understand the motivations of a creator. You can argue this only if there's a confusion, isn't it? That confusion is in 2 and 4. So we can, of course, argue that no one can understand the motivations of a creator, but that is hardly a scientific explanation. It's not a scientific explanation saying that we don't know the motivation. But to come to one, I need to first pose a confusing question. This is the confusing question. So either 2, 4 or 4, 2, we'll get to that in detail, whether it's 2, 4, 4, 2, or why it should be 2, 4, 4, 2. But know that one has to come afterwards, because the of course in one needs the context. Okay. Now, if you remember in the previous question, the of course sentence was in the beginning, because there the sentence that followed, that of course was following up from something before. But in this case, this of course has a direct connection here. So that's why you should notice that every parajumble is a different problem. You can't take the, you can't say, okay, this happened in this question. So in all the questions where I see this term, the same thing will happen. Context is extremely important, which is why you need good grammar and good vocab. Okay, you can't just breeze past cat verbal without understanding vocab or grammar. So please make sure you're improving those things apart from solving these questions. Anyway, so 2, 4, 4, 2, whatever, and then 1. Now, like many vertebrates, the python has a pelvis, the skeletal structure that connects the lower legs to the upper body. Now you have to ask this question, should I put 3 first or 4 first, right? So like many vertebrates is your big clue. This is what you call outside to inside. The paragraph is talking about python and posing a question and then saying we can argue like this or we can't argue like this. But it starts with like many vertebrates. It's basically giving you the introduction for the python, and it's telling you it has a pelvis, isn't it? So if the python was created, then what purpose would there have been to give it a pelvis? Let's say I start with 4 and 2. This whole like many vertebrates doesn't make any more sense because it's an outside topic. In the middle of a paragraph, you can't bring an outside topic. The same thing we've discussed in the previous question also, right? So like many vertebrates has to be on the left, which is why your 3 has to be in the left, 1 has to be in the right. So 2, 4, 4, 2 is the only confusion that you will have. Now you have to ask, what is the difference between 2 and 4? Like many vertebrates, the python has a pelvis, the skeletal structure that connects the lower legs to the upper body. Let's say you want to follow this with 4. If the python was created, then what purpose would there have been to give it a pelvis? We can, of course, argue that no one can understand. It absolutely makes sense. 3, 4, 1 is complete within itself. Okay. But similarly, from a structural standpoint of what possible uses a pelvis to a creature that has no legs, because the python's already been introduced, 3, 2, 1 also makes sense, which is why you can't decide whether it's 2 or 4 based on what can follow 3 in this case. You'll have to compare 2 and 4 within each other, right? So from a structural standpoint of what possible uses a pelvis to a creature that has no legs, if the python was created, then what purpose would there have been to give it a pelvis? The answer lies in this particular vocab connection. Okay. So if the python was created, of course, we can argue that no one can understand the motivations of a creator. You can't introduce this, then go here, then go back to creator. Okay. The vocab pattern is what will save you, just like now saved you earlier. So you'll have to look for this. If you remove this part, these two are lateral arguments. Okay. They're absolutely of the same stature. Okay. It's a creature here is python. So it's not like creature is the bigger idea and python is a small idea, therefore creature has to come. If you use that logic, again, you're wrong. We already know what's a creature because of the third sentence, which says the python, right? So it's just another way of saying python, a creature. The only logic is that created is there. You need the connection with the creator, which is the ending sentence, isn't it? Therefore, the answer will be 3, then 2, then 4, then 1. Obviously, for a slow reader, there's so much to read here, but otherwise, there shouldn't be much of a problem solving this. What you're looking for basically is the word connects, right? As an analogy, consider the way in which computers work. This is your big clue. Which is the analogy? The analogy is this one, okay? So you know that 3 and 2 is one block for you. This is where you start from, isn't it? As an analogy, where is the analogy? The analogy is here. Analogy means like an example to explain something is called an analogy. It's a figure of speech. So 3, 2 is one block. And then you have the other connection, right? The ability of 4 different bases taken 3 at a time to specify all the information needed for the synthesis of proteins is astounding. It boggles the mind. See, boggles is a synonym of astounding. This is the word connect I'm talking about. It boggles the mind that the diverse structure of complex protein molecules can be specified with only a 4-letter alphabet. Now, as an analogy means that the 3, 2 block has to come later, isn't it? It's like saying, for example. So obviously, when you have a theory, for example, comes later, isn't it? So you know that 1, 4 or 4, 1, whatever it is, 1, 4 or 4, 1 comes before 3, 2. This is step 2. First, you have to get the 3, 2 block, and you'll have to know that 1, 4 or 4, 1, whatever it is, comes to the left side of 3, 2. Half the job is done. Now you have to understand the point where 1 and 4 have to be differentiated, right? So because here 3 is not going to help you. 1 can also come in front of 3, 4 can also come in front of 3. So you'll have to figure out between 1 and 4 what exactly is the upstream argument. The ability of 4 different bases taken 3 at a time to specify all the information needed for the synthesis of proteins is astounding. It boggles the mind that the diverse structure of complex protein molecules can be specified with only a 4-letter alphabet. Okay, now synthesis of proteins is the bigger idea, and it boggles the mind that the diverse structure of complex protein molecules can be specified with only a 4-letter alphabet. So think of it this way, right? Multiple things. The ability of 4 different bases taken 3 at a time to specify all the information needed for the synthesis of proteins helps you understand why we are talking about proteins, isn't it? It boggles the mind that the diverse structure of complex protein molecules can be specified with only a 4-letter alphabet. Okay, and then he's going to an analogy. So between 1 and 4, there's only a very thin, narrow line, and you can be forgiven if you get 4-1 instead of 1-4. Okay, because it's so hard to understand unless you get the feel or tone of a sentence. The slightly bigger idea in 1. What's the bigger idea? It's telling you that to specify all the information needed for the synthesis of proteins, whatever information is needed, that information is there in these 4 different bases, whatever it is. Okay, 4 different bases does not give you clarity. It's therefore a generic, vague idea. In 4, directly coming down to diverse structure of complex protein molecules is specified inside the alphabet. So now we are being introduced to what exactly it is the alphabet in quotes, right? Not some vague term like 4 different bases taken 3 at a time. This is the vague part. This is the specific part. The generic part comes before the specific part. And the diverse structure of complex protein molecules, why are we talking about it? Because we are trying to understand the information needed for the synthesis of proteins. Synthesis of proteins, diverse structure of complex protein molecules. Isn't it? Bigger idea, smaller idea. Therefore, 1 comes before 4. Very hard to figure this out if you're trying to read, and especially if you're not a biology student, even the sentence itself won't make sense. So this is the easy part. Getting the 1, 4, 4, 1 to the left is the next step, and it's also quite easy. But 1, 4 you'll have to sit and ponder. So these are the questions that are not unsolvable. It's actually not medium difficult. Also, I think it's on the easier side, because after a little bit of practice you'll be able to figure out the big idea versus small idea very easily, right? So if one sentence has religion, another sentence has Hinduism, straight away know religion is a bigger idea. Education versus MBA, education is the bigger idea. Okay, Marvel and Iron Man, Marvel is the bigger idea, or as DC fans like to tease people, there's a DC and Marvel. DC is the bigger idea. Don't get into those wars, but you understand, right? It's very easy to figure out what's the bigger idea and smaller idea if you're a good reader. But if you don't think you're a good reader, focus on the keywords. What is the sentence about? The sentence is about information needed for the synthesis of proteins. What is this sentence about? Diverse structure of complex protein molecules, isn't it? So going inside deeper, zooming in. So when you're zooming in, it comes later in the paragraph, and zooming out, it obviously is the beginning of the paragraph. So remember things like these. So I hope this video did help you. If you want, you can leave a comment saying whether you felt that these questions were easy, medium, or difficult, because then it'll give me some idea on what kind of questions I should make Parajumbles for you in subsequent videos. That's one. Second, there's one more, disclaimer. I notice a lot of you ask individual questions in the comments. I'm really sorry, but I do not have the bandwidth to address the individual doubts about the questions about what the content of the video. So generally I try to cover everything in the video. So if the video makes sense, great, or else watch it. You'll probably find the answer. Don't be lazy. Watch it a few times. If it's not making sense, ask someone else. But otherwise, I'm really sorry. I can't do more than this. So please don't waste your time typing out long comments about questions about the things discussed in the video, because 3-4 days later I'll not even remember. I'll have to watch the video, and I do not have the bandwidth for that. Secondly, I know some of you are worried about the reach and about thumbnails, and I'm like really appreciate the concern the guys are showing, but honestly I don't care. I'm not here to become a social media influencer or something. I'm here to just बस अंग्रेजी पढ़ानी है मेरे को, social media influencer नहीं बनना है. तो it's okay. People who are desperate enough to find the answer, they will find the content. If the reach of your videos and your promotion is what decides the propagation of something, it's okay. You don't need to worry about. You don't worry about this stuff. You watch the video, learn. Okay, take care of yourself. Until next time, peace out.